we really are just characters in a play, Pat. Like we really are.
Absolutely.
And yeah, even from a biblical perspective, I turned to Christianity a couple of years ago, got baptized last December, which has been really helpful for me. And uh, the I think they say a lot of the same things. Like we're just characters in a play. That's what we are. And because of that, we can choose how we play these roles, just like an actor. So we can choose to be an asshole, or we could choose to be kind. These are all choices. We can choose to listen to somebody else and try to understand them, or we can choose just to call them names to make ourselves feel better. But the people that are just going off and calling names, those are people that the reason that they do that is because it makes them feel important. The reason they need to feel important because they actually don't feel important. That's why they do it. Hello, friends. I'm proud to give a shout out to our sponsor, the Canadian Legacy Project. Veterans Affairs Canada is very limited in its service offering to veterans, so the Canadian Legacy Project has stepped up to fill the gap. CLP develops and delivers a full suite of free programs for Canadian veterans. CLP celebrates our veterans by offering meaningful support for healing and the transition to civilian life. Homes for Heroes, Business Boot Camp, Service Dogs, educational bursaries, equine therapy, and more are available through the Canadian Legacy Project. Find out more at CanadianLegacy.org. Hello, all you beautiful souls. Thanks for joining me for another very special edition of Operation Tango Romeo, the Trauma Recovery Podcast for veterans, first responders, and their families. There's a few members of my former regiment that have rose to fame and have shaken the birdcage and have caused trouble, real troublemakers, those Patricias. And I got one of them on the show with me today. This fella was the very first Veterans Ombudsman, and I can't wait to talk about that. And on the show today, I have Pat Stogran. Thanks, brother. I appreciate you joining me.
Oh, I appreciate being invited.
Well, you were very well known for a very long time, very outspoken fella, as all of my favorite Patricias tend to be. Rick Hillier was on the show, way back in the beginning, so probably 6 years ago. And the troops loved him. The troops loved you. What do you think the difference is for the officers that are popular and the officers popular with the troops, that is, and those that aren't? What's the dividing line, would you say?
Yeah, well, first of all, I wouldn't put me in the same category as General Hillier. I think outwardly we're outspoken. Um, uh, I never tried to be outspoken. When I joined the military, I hated the military. I was a martial artist. I loved karate. I wrestled in high school a little bit. It wasn't a main occupation, but I trained with anybody I could learn from. And to me, I joined the military to get a degree and went through RMC. I hated every second of it, but I fell in love with the infantry. And I loved phase training and the tactics, and I looked at when I decided to stay in the military and not just serve out my basic engagement. Um, I decided it was like a martial art with a pension plan, and my job was to be a thinker, and my weapon was my troops, and yeah, so I didn't talk. I wasn't outspoken to condemn the system. I had a set of values as what I perceived to be a warrior, and I just stuck true to those values. And the whole outspokenness at the end of my career was I had soldiers who put their faith in my decision making, and we did some scary shit. The first rotation was all about unknown, and I've got so much respect for the way the soldiers in the 3rd Battalion approached the unknown. They weren't cowboys, but they didn't cower to anybody in Afghanistan. And so when I came home, I found that the system, the generals were treating the young soldiers who had literally been called off course to go to war. And then they were thrown back into the hopper to compete with their peers to get back onto career courses. So that was the beginning of my undoing, because I felt I had to stand up for them. And I fronted up to generals. These guys, they put their faith in me.
So you're
And I
saying
had to pay them back.
unqualified privates, like guys that weren't even finished battle school, were
No,
off to
no, no,
war?
no, no. Guys that were on small arms courses
Oh,
and
okay.
career 6B and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Like, they literally went down and knocked on their doors in the shacks in Gagetown and said, "You're off the course, guys. You're going to war." Like, it's bringing tears back to me now. Like, that's what we thought. And we were going with what we had. And I knew what I had was 400 plus or minus soldiers who I had put through a ringer with simunition. We were the first unit to use simunition. We used miles extensively, so I knew my guys could fight in a gunfight and survive. And all that was lost on the system. The
Going to
general.
translate for the audience. Miles gear is kind of like soldier paintball, where you're pretending with blanks and kind of like paint. Yeah, laser
Laser
tag.
engagement
Laser tag is better than is a better analogy than paintball, but it's the original laser tag, way back, way back in the 80s and 90s.
Have you ever worked with simunition?
No,
We were the first unit to get simunition. It's really paintball. It adapts to the C7 and
yeah.
the family of small arms. And we got the first 250,000 rounds in the Canadian Army. And we had our troops out in any deserted farm structure around Edmonton going to war. And that's, I put the troops through that kind of very ad hoc training. I must add, at that point in time, we were a light battalion slated for disbandment. So the kind of characters who came to the light battalion were guys that, wanted to do it the hard way without the carriers.
This is still third?
What's that? Yeah, 3rd Battalion, yeah. And it was going to be disbanded. I was told I would be probably closing the doors on the light battalions. They were considered equipment deficient. Anyways, I'm starting to get in. My mind's racing at all the bullshit that was going on in that day. But we had a war to fight. And the soldiers, to a person, despite all of the press and all, like equipment deficient battalions, and we had generals coming out saying, we're going mech and all that stuff. These were guys who wanted to do the hard yards. And, so I felt I had an obligation when I came back. Like, I had achieved my career ambition. And so, being outspoken, I was just sticking up for the troops. And it meant torpedoing my own career, So
how would you describe, because I've tried to describe to people the 3rd Battalion. That was my first one, the old 3rd in Victoria, which was a whole different kettle of fish. Officially and in practice, like, what's the difference between the 3rd Battalion and the other 2 battalions?
Well, that's a good question, because we were known as the Hollywood Battalion back in the day, and you came to the battalion in Esquimalt just before I left. I spent a wholesome 6 years in that battalion, and I can say some of the best exercises I've ever been on in terms of not so much tactics, but tactical maneuvering was on the island. With a rucksack on my back. And we did that probably twice a year. I don't know, before Wainwright kind of thing. And so the troops I found in the 3rd Battalion, especially when I went back, like, in my day, the NCOs, when I was a young officer, the NCOs were, they were highly competent in their tactical skills, but on PT, they were normally at the back. When I came back to the 3rd Battalion, when I, as CO, went out on PT with a young NCO, I knew I was going to be driven. The guys that were coming to the battalion were mixed martial artists, fitness buffs, guys that, took pride in the modifications to their uniforms. They were, I would say, what CSOR is now. Many of the guys that
I think
were
that's
in the
a fair.
3rd Battalion
I think
were
that's fair.
aspiring to go to the Hill. And I also had the privilege of having some ex-assaulters who considered the 3rd Battalion to be their shore billet. So we had a really good mix of, I would say, attitude, professionalism, sticking to the basics. Um, we amazed our 101st brethren in the conduct of our air assaults, in that our troops were as faster at getting off the aircraft and getting into their battle drills. And that's because they'd done it on carriers before. The vehicle didn't mean much to them. They had their kit and they were ready to go. And I'm beaming with pride now. They served me magnificently in Afghanistan, which is the
What would be the
pinnacle of
best comparison, Pat, in American units to a 3rd Battalion? I was thinking Army Rangers, but I don't think we were quite there.
At least the Rangers. Yeah, we
At
had
least the Rangers.
Yeah, no, I would say, well, we take so much time. Like the commander of the 101st commented on our section commanders as sergeants who had so much experience. He said, in my, we train at every level to the highest standard. So he was blown away at the experience and the trust that I would put in our NCOs. So I would say we had several Ranger units come to do parachuting and training in Wainwright that we would sponsor. And our troops who were hosting them, were kinship with the Ranger Battalion that came up. And I'll just close off. We did one operation on Tora Bora where some Delta Force snipers came up to me and asked if they could come on my op. And so I said, sure, it was that casual. And these were hardcore snipers, Delta Force. And they tracked me down at the end of the op. They found me. They went looking for me because they said, as Delta Force, they had never worked with better troops.
Now that's saying something from a tier one unit. Holy smokes.
Yeah. So through all the cuts and all the stuff that happens to militaries in government, that was the kind of people we were attracting to the Canadian Forces. And this is why I mentioned when we were talking about CDSs, to reduce the standards when there are so many young people that want that standard. Like, that's what impressed me about the Patricians.
Exactly, Pat. Like, and this is what I've tried to muddle through. Maybe we can work through it between the two of us. But the idea was, if we lower the standards, it'll be easier to get people to join the military, which is exactly wrong. It's exactly the opposite.
Counterintuitive. Yeah.
Brother, when I was at the recruiting center, I thought I joined to be a medic. I had no interest in infantry, right? I didn't even know what the frickin' infantry was. So I'm going through the recruiting process. And I thought I heard him say that I got the position as a field medic. And then I don't hear from him for a month or two. I walk back into the recruiting office. He goes, "Oh, no, you misunderstood. You're not going anywhere. You didn't make the cut." And I thought, well, I already had the going away party because I thought it was February 11th that I was going. So what else do you got? Music to a recruiter's ears, right? He said, "We got the infantry." I said, "Fine, I'll take it. What is it?" And then he basically, what got me over the hump was, as I was looking at the mannequins in the recruiting office, I said, "Is the infantry, that's like the hard thing, right?" He goes, "Oh, it's the hardest. Like, that's the hardest job in the military." I said, "Well, why fuck around then? Like, if I'm going to do this, let's do this." And then I joined. So I ended up in the infantry. And then not only the infantry, but I ended up in the 3rd Battalion, which is the toughest of the three. And it was the toughest of the 3rd Battalion versions at that time because of the colonel that we had in, who was the former colonel of the Airborne. Then he came to the 3rd and wanted it to be, it was Colonel Kenward. And he was hell-bent.
One of my role models.
Oh, what a time for me to have served. Like, unbelievable. So I served under Kenward, who made it more airborne than the Airborne. And the 3rd Battalion they won the national award for the most physically fit unit in the country 2 years in a row, which means we were more fit than the Airborne. God, it was brutal. It was brutal, but you're proud of it, right? Because making it harder is what you want, not easier.
I agree with you 100%. That's what I loved about the Army. The challenges doing these Gagetown Phase 2 infantry was a beasting. It was the aim was just to get rid of people, and I loved it. I remember Sergeant Duff. I'd just come off the jump course, and there was this RCR Sergeant Duff, and he hated the airborne, and all I wanted to be was airborne, and so I would. Uh, to get under his skin, I would get the guys when we were running back from the ranges and we're dropping out. I just come off the airborne course, so I was getting us to sing the airborne, and then I'd have to do push-ups because he hated the airborne regiment, and I'd have to do push-ups and then catch back up to the group, eh? But I love that kind of game, kind of working on the edge and trying to keep a sense of humor and beasting each other and in a professional way. It was such a growth period for me when I was younger, and I had full intentions of serving my basic and getting out, but I loved soldiering. Peter Kenward was the adj in the 3rd Battalion, and he was in Cyprus when I first arrived at the battalion, and I invited him out for a road run when he just came back off his leave. I was going out and he was getting ready for one, and I was blown away with. He says I pushed him, but I was chasing.
That's saying something, Pat. Holy shit! Because
But I
he
fell in
was
love with it.
just a super. He still is. Apparently, he's still a frickin' Superman, running up and down mountains with a rucksack
Yeah, no
on
doubt.
Vancouver Island somewhere.
I say a role model of mine. I never could have done what he did physically, but he instilled in me that need for physical fitness, and it's not so much about fighting; it's about surviving a wound. So you want to. We got time. Make sure you're going to survive a bullet wound by being, cardiovascular and all that stuff. So yeah, no, I always him and John Jolly. I don't know if you remember Colonel Jolly, but
No.
Jolly was more. He was 2nd Battalion in Germany, and he was more like a Clausewitz or a Guderian. Very theoretical and but driven for operations. Like Kenward was airborne operations. He was mech and had a memory on him. He remembered 7-section battle drills inside out, and even as a colonel, he used to come around and just test me like, why are things seen? And you'd have to go through all those basics. And these are the guys.
Best lecture ever. I love the why things are seen lecture.
Oh, yeah, no. So I get, I think back to those young days. It was because of those professionals. I want to be like him. Yeah. Walt Matinchuk, CDS later on, we won't, hold that against him, but he was a young cadet and he was built like a shit brick house and could run like a deer. And I came in as a raw recruit saying, that's what I want to be. So when Wayne Eyre reduced the dress standards, and I don't know what he did, I'm an old dinosaur, but personally, I agree with you. We joined to be all we can be.
The standards are for a reason, right, Pat? I mean, when I was at the 110th and there was a sergeant, he might have even been a warrant. God, I think he might have been a company sergeant major, and he's got a man bun. Now, I got nothing against man buns. I like making fun of them like everybody else, but I actually don't give a shit. However, in uniform, there's a reason for the high and tight. Like being cut high and tight, there's something about it that just makes you feel tougher, but it's uniformity. It lets you know that because everybody's the same, you can count on everybody. It's
I think there's something truly psychological in that.
There really is. Like, can I count on you or not? Like we're trusting each other with our fucking lives. Can I count on you or not? And you can size somebody up by a glance, right? Either they look like a bag of rags or they look switched on. Just by at a glance, you can tell. And if somebody's all disheveled and non-bloused and shaggy, and I was like, okay, I can't trust you.
Yeah. And I'd be careful. I don't want to appear like I'm attacking the modern soldier. I think they're missing out on something that is important to a military. No doubt they're trying to achieve higher standards, and it's something that the institution, this is kind of what, like when I get talking about the whole general officers thing, where I think there's a separation in cultures, and you can't go beyond colonel unless you change your mindset from being in a unit. My role models, Kenward and Jolly, never made it past colonel because they stood for the troops,
Yeah.
and they couldn't get into the uh, 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 obsequious sycophant kind of. And it's not okay, I'm going to be obsequious. It's the kind of attitude that I'll bend for this one. This isn't that important. Whereas in a unit, you can't do that. In a unit, if you're going to, and I imagine being in the front lines in Ukraine,
Oh,
where you're being shelled all the time, and sanitary conditions and all that. If you haven't been disciplined to the core, then you're a civilian fighting in hell. You know,
yeah.
and even the hardcore warriors from our day suffered post-traumatic stress. I think the easier you make it to get in, and if you're not suffering the hardships, like we're all stress casualties in one way, shape, or form. But I think having that mental discipline in every aspect of your workplace is an important uh, characteristic of a military force.
So, are you suggesting that the harder you train, the more resilient you are to PTSD? Is that your theory?
No, uh, I think we're all going to come back fucked up somehow.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Although I was thinking about it when you first said it, because one of the things on the show is that I make sure that people know that PTSD is a neurological injury. It actually changes the structure of your brain. It's a physical injury. You can see it in a brain scan, and it can happen to anybody. But there is such a thing as resilience as well. It doesn't mean that you're tougher, but there is such a thing as resilience. So if you the harder you train, the more resilient I think you would be to it. But
yeah,
but nobody
and
but
I agree
nobody's
with that.
but
I don't know.
nobody nobody's immune.
I don't know that it's a resilience, but like we're playing with words here. But I think you're touching on something there. Um, we had developed in the third battalion, but it got interrupted by a war. I had a lift program that was developed by Major Scott Bland, and light infantry focused training was our lift training, and one of them was stress inoculation. And we'd actually arranged with the local coroner that the troops, we'd bring them in and they would watch autopsies. And my theory was that I didn't want the soldiers, the first dead body that they see, to be one that they made. I wanted them
Yeah.
to be comfortable with that kind of, and I think so. We were kind of trying to build resilience, but what I think is uh, a more important factor to consider is childhood trauma. I think many,
Yes, you're right.
yeah, no, many soldiers, myself included, and I didn't even realize these were traumas until I was trying to figure out my headspace and why I was so angry and all that kind of stuff. And trauma could be, I just had an angry father. He was a fucking hard going Ukrainian farm boy. And I don't begrudge him. I thought I had a healthy upbringing, but I was scared of him. And I
Hmm.
think that was working at me or whatever. So the more soldiers I talked to, the more I found, hey, they don't even realize it. Maybe we just talk about our backgrounds, but I think childhood trauma, family trauma, uh, can compound, because I say we all come back changed, you know, from an
Well, it's
operation.
true. So this is one of
Experience changes you.
100%. Uh, so the people that choose the infantry, if you've had a real nice leave it to beaver upbringing, you're not going to choose the infantry because you're not that stress inoculation that you're talking about. It happens basically starts at birth, and those of us that had a rough go as a kid. So what's called an ACEs score, adverse childhood events and they score it. And let's pretend it's a 10 is the worst childhood trauma imaginable. Every infanteer is like a 7 at least. And there's something about it, and I really don't understand the correlation, but the US statistics show it really well that the higher your childhood trauma score, the more trauma rich the environment you choose to work in. And
Is that right?
the special force, like infantry, is way at the top, but people that go on to special forces or have the super high speed, low drag commando careers, their ACEs scores are predictably higher than even
Is
the
that
average
right?
infantry. I remember being in battle school, knowing that I had a fucked up childhood, but listening to all the other guys, and I go, oh, I guess this is the whole world. Like the whole world has a fucked up childhood. But no, that's just an infantry thing. So
Interesting. Well, I became a student of Gabor Mate.
I love Gabor. Love him.
Yeah, and that's what really kind of I had this theory by my experience with so many veterans who had been in hell.
Mm-hmm.
But then, yeah, he brought out the whole thing of childhood trauma, and it's a revelation for me, and I wish I knew more about it, because I think if we were a little more sophisticated, we could inoculate people to a degree. But I think, I learned more about myself because I had been diagnosed with PTSD. Like I thought it was a bullshit diagnosis while I
Yeah.
was in. But then I wanted to learn, and I learned. That's how I learned that maybe my father, I was always on guard around my father,
Oh yeah.
and maybe that caused me. So, no, there's so much that could have been drawn out of our battle casualties, but it was, just forget about them. They've got the new veterans charter. Somebody else will look after them. How many generals stood up and said, this is bullshit. We got to fix them as well as we can hurt them.
Well, if you broke it, you bought it. That's my theory.
Yeah, yeah. No, I don't want to get angry at this. I put a lot of effort into putting it all behind me, but yeah, no, I just don't understand it. Like how Canadians, look at our healthcare system, and I'm experiencing it now, watching my family. But um, how do any Canadians think that a government that will treat their young people who have been savagely butchered at their behest, uh, if they're mistreated, how can any Canadian think that there's a government that's looking out for them? That's fundamental. And governments, successive governments, my entire adult life, our quality of life has been diminishing. The Canadian Forces, as we all thought back in the battle days, we were going to turn it around. And the Canadian Forces, despite us being a pale comparison to our forefathers in the Second World War, we thought we were building a nice, strong Canada. Look at it now. Successive governments have let us down, and they're still calling on these young people to put themselves in harm's way.
Yeah, my oldest boy is a Calgary Highlander. He's doing well.
God bless.
And don't tell anybody, Pat, but he's a little disappointed that it wasn't more difficult. Because
Bingo.
I didn't really get into super details with him, but he wanted to challenge himself. And he wanted to know, well, what did my dad go through? Well, my battle school was in 91, and it was the last traditional course in the Patricias, period. So we started with 18 people. We graduated with 5. The smallest course, we had more instructors than we did recruits. And so you're just not going to beat that.
Yeah.
We started with 18, graduated with 5.
Numbers.
It was brutal.
Yeah.
But we got it done. Well, 5 of us did.
Well, I remember the section commanders courses in the early days, or the courses that they'd hold out at Albert Head there, and yeah, it was like we got the cream of the crop out of there. Like I think there's better ways of doing it, because a lot of good people get pissed off when they fail a course, or like, because every one of our courses are of that standard. I remember phase training. I really was impressed with the NCOs, with their knowledge of weapons, taking us on road runs and stuff like that. And then I do the basic jump course, and these young guys, uh, yeah, bringing it full circle to what we started this discussion on. I think, if anything, I'd make it a bigger challenge. I've got young people in the jiu-jitsu gym that I'm in that, if they went into the forces, they would think special forces. They want to be that, and it's. I think, in my experience in the Third Battalion, I was self-actualized. I think we did some hardcore soldiering. It may not be what CSOR is doing today, but I wish them all the best.
But
Sorry
let's
about
talk
the
about.
rambling.
Oh no, shit, no. It's beautiful. I love it.
I've never done an interview like this, so at length. So,
Well, it's the only way to get to the bottom of things. I've been interviewed by everybody but the CBC who did a pre-interview with me, and all you get is carefully curated sound bites.
yeah,
So, and you've been in the news so many frickin' times, you bloody well know that the commander's intent of the message is not what comes out on a news story unless it's in line with their narrative.
yeah,
So
very true.
that's where long form podcasts, where if they're done what I think is the right way, it's just a genuine, authentic conversation. I'm not trying to steer anything one way or the other. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on in Pat's head, and maybe talk about some ideas and figure out your view, not push my view. That's the beauty of a long form conversation. That's why the Rogan show does so well.
Mm-hmm.
He'll talk to anybody about anything, and it's not about an agenda. It's about, well, what's the truth? What?
Yeah, no, I love the new form of media coming out. And I think what initiated your invitation to bring me on was my comment that, I wish there were more. Like, let's start some revolutionary talk online. Let's exchange uh, real information, real intelligence, rather than argue about it. I try to use Facebook. I deliberately seed things out there. I'm looking at different ways of looking at it. I don't want to be a libtard or a Trump or whatever. To me, that's exactly what somebody wants us to do. They want us to argue. I would sooner
Mhm.
discuss, and especially with people like Iranian people in the gym. I'm kind of picking their ears. I want to hear the conversation, if you will. I don't want those sound bites. So yeah, here we go again.
One of the things that I do on very carefully and very purposely on social media is to encourage people not to call each other names, because it doesn't help. It doesn't address any issue ever. And
No,
yet
no.
we have these people, especially on X, I think is the worst, and just screaming at each other, calling each other names.
Yeah.
And somehow it's only a small person that does that. So like you talk about getting angry at people, and that doesn't happen to me a lot anymore because of a couple of different perspectives. One, I know through all the work that I've done on myself that if people knew better, they'd do better. So if somebody is, even though we can see potential in somebody else, doesn't mean that they can see it in themselves. So if I look at somebody that I can see all kinds of potential in, but they're only operating at 50%, I don't say, "Hey, you should do better." I wonder, what's holding you back? I mean, I can see that you've got more, that you could go to 100%, but obviously something is holding you back. What is that? And can I help you get past it?
Mm.
Right. Um, and the other perspective is really Shakespearean for me. Like when you look at all kinds of different plays in Shakespeare, like Macbeth's speech, and I think about this one all the time. Out, out, brief candle. Life is but a walking shadow. A poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. I play that again and again and again and again in my
Impressive.
thinking. I just stuck from English 20 back in high school. It just stuck. But we really are just characters in a play, Pat. Like we really are.
Absolutely.
And yeah, even from a biblical perspective, I turned to Christianity a couple of years ago, got baptized last December, which has been really helpful for me. And uh, the I think they say a lot of the same things. Like we're just characters in a play. That's what we are. And because of that, we can choose how we play these roles, just like an actor. So we can choose to be an asshole, or we could choose to be kind. These are all choices. We can choose to listen to somebody else and try to understand them, or we can choose just to call them names to make ourselves feel better. But the people that are just going on and calling names, those are people that the reason that they do that is because it makes them feel important. The reason they need to feel important because they actually don't feel important. That's why they do it. That's what gives me compassion for them instead of, and then I just mute them and ignore
I
them.
would submit, however, that based on what I've seen in my adult life, is that there are forces at play that are encouraging us
Oh, absolutely.
to act like children.
Which is all the
And
more
we think
reason
that,
not
well,
to.
because it's politics and we're deciding on a government, it's okay if we act like children, or we're not behaving like children at all. Well, no. And that's why I try to, and I think in the military, when I went to Bosnia, I tried to put myself in the belligerent's shoes. So when I was an UNMO with the a UN military observer with the Croatians, I tried to empathize with them and understand the war from their perspective. But at the same time, I couldn't hold their grudges. I couldn't hold their beliefs. I had to understand, because when I was with the Serbs, I would try to do the same, mind meld with them. And so when I look at politics now, I say, it's not working, folks. My
It's because you were
entire
able to
adult.
make the division, Pat, that it's okay to try to understand somebody. That doesn't mean that you agree with them.
No,
You can
exactly.
empathize.
Good point.
You can empathize with somebody without agreeing. You can listen to somebody without agreeing. But the way the politics is right now, on both sides, I'm
The
definitely
whole society is acting like children.
the whole society does. Uh,
Absolutely.
I think I have more sway with my conservative friends, so I encourage them to take the high road, and they're more likely to take the high road. I have found.
No,
Um, well, I found
as a
anyway.
third party, and I would say I've got a left leaning. I you know,
Well, you did run
uh,
for the leadership of the NDP, so yeah, of which
because you know what, the
I was a
party
card
didn't matter
carrying
to me.
member at one point.
The party didn't matter to me. The
Yeah,
barriers to entry. I didn't have to be a rich lawyer from Montreal or Toronto to get into the NDP, to get up on the stage. But then they attacked my family and my children behind the scenes. So I just
oh,
said, fuck you,
Jesus.
and walked away from it. Oh, yeah, there's a big story behind it. And they'll play all their rhetoric and all that bullshit. But it's a real sick, perverted culture. And yeah, barriers of entry. I didn't have $250,000 to put into the pot, and another $250,000 as a good behavior kind of bond. Politics is such a corrupt bullshit, and the only reason you get a CDS is because he's kissed somebody's ass along the way. And yeah, some CDSs talk tougher than others, but the reason why the Canadian forces failed in Afghanistan and are a shadow of of even what you and I served in is because conservatives, whether it's Stephen Harper or Jean Chrétien, it's been a continual decline. None of them plugged
It's true.
any of the holes to do with ethics, morality, these ethics things. Trudeau had 10 of them, but he got a $200 fine. He should be in fucking jail.
Yeah, that's
You
true
know, they
too.
should have they should have a conduct, a 119 of their own for politicians, a conduct act or omission to the prejudice of good governance and peaceful order. And then you go to jail for shit like that. You know,
Well,
and we
I don't
can
think there's
argue.
anybody that actually believes that there's equal application of the law. Like, no, there's not.
No, and
No, no,
Harper,
no, there's
I
not.
took on Harper. He did his best to cheat our young casualties of his fucking war. Canadians don't cut and run except in 2014. So I guess we do cut and run now. No, all politicians and all political, Stephen Harper, when Wolf Hess von Krugner was killed by Israelis in Lebanon with a JDAMs because they were bombing off the back of a Michelin map. No, they bombed a UN tower with a Canadian that Harper put in it, and he blamed the presence of UN observers on the UN. Why didn't they pull them out? Because they're observing your fucking war. So no, conservatives are no better than liberals. It's a game to keep you feeling better than your liberals. You're saying, yeah, I do believe the conservatives are better. No, you're not. You're just the same until you can get over that and recognize why are there only two parties? Look at the way, and I could go on and on about my short experience. I also went for the none of the above party in Ontario politics, and I said, as long as I can act like none of the above, but they got their own corruption and their own scheming and they act like just like the rest of them. It's all to keep us divided and and not hold them accountable. Why don't you hold them accountable? You hold the board of directors accountable when things are sliding out of control. Who's the board of directors in Canada? Stephen Harper was, a classic example of a duplicit, disingenuous, harmful person. And I had his suckhole sycophant members of committees coming up to me after committee saying, "Oh, Pat, I wish we could do more for the veterans." And it was hard for me not to be rude to them because they're the ones that stand behind Harper and nod and smile when he says something and fuck.
Well,
Anyways,
that's certainly every party. Like you see the clapping seals. Their leader speaks, and everybody just nods their head and whether it makes sense or not. And that is both sides for sure.
It's all sides. I could tell you some stories about the NDP and Jagmeet Singh, and God bless their party. He led them to where they are.
Well, he was a handsome bugger, but that's about all he had going for him.
Oh,
Killer beard.
They're all like that. And you got to see, because I came from a culture where I admired guys like Peter Kenward and John Jolly, by the book. And they lived their lives by the book, really authentic people. And
people that demand accountability, both from themselves and those around them. That
was good way to put it.
I saw. So good. We did my first 32K, which for the American audience is 20 miles. It's exactly 20 miles is 32 kilometers. And yeah, we did that with a backpack on. The first one I did was with, it's going to sound like one of these fish stories. Like I went to school uphill both ways. Well, we fucking did. My first 32K, my pack, I was easily 80 pounds. In the summer, I was a C9 gunner, which I forget what they call it. Is that the SAW or the law?
I'm a dinosaur.
Yeah, what the Americans call it, but the C9 is the automatic 200 round belt fed. I'm saying that for the audience, Pat. But so the big machine gun, or it's actually the smaller of the two machine guns. But that's what I was carrying, and with God knows how many, I think 4 extra 200 round belts of ammo, 2 in the butt pack, and then 2 in the webbing, and then a holy shit rucksack. After about 10 days in the field, we did the 32K. So of course we're doing the 32 at the end of the X. And my feet were hamburger, like they went through a wood chipper by the time I was done, because my boots were a size and a half too big, but oh well. But that was my first 32K. That was under Kenward. And what the fuck was my point? I rambled.
Story, anyways.
Then I lost the point. Oh, right. So at the end of it, Kenward had this um, a bunch of the guys on special teams. We had a competition among the companies, and so they paddled the assault boats like 5Ks at the end of the 32. Then did the obstacle course. Like it was insane, but the guys did it. At the end of it, we realized that to cut weight, because it was insanely heavy, a lot of guys buried their ammo. Now, it wasn't live rounds, it was all blanks, right? But still, so a lot of guys buried their ammo on the sides of the mountain and stuff. Kenward found out about it, and he took his officers and senior NCOs for a run. And you don't want to try to keep up with Kenward.
Yeah.
And I remember his words before, we're going to, you fuckers are coming on a run with me, and we're going to have a chat about accountability, and you better keep up, and if he says you better keep up, then you better keep up. And the guy was built like Superman.
Yeah.
So, but that was Colonel Kenward. He demanded accountability from himself and from his leaders, period.
Yeah.
Uncompromising.
I'm not sure I could have measured up as a company commander in his battalion, but I sure would have loved to have tried. No, and I think that's the spirit of the kind of young person who joins the infantry is, holy shit, that looks like a challenge. I'd love to do it. And, so you want commanders like Kenward that do it themselves. That's something that's lacking amongst the upward mobile is walking the talk.
Well, lead from the front. Leaders eat last. That's
well,
that's what makes
and I hate those. Sorry to interrupt, but I hate those that laundry list of things that you should do to look like a leader. To me, that's the facade. If you're not genuine, if you're not a genuine person who, I respect the fact that I know a C9 gunner carries a fuck of a lot more ammunition and water than I do. So I'm going to let him eat first. That's the genuine respect I have. I'm paid to think. I'm not paid to do that. And so I think it has to come from there. And that's one thing I'll say for Kenward, he and Jolly too, my role models, because I never measured up physically to Kenward, but he still respected me as a warrior kind of thing, because I threw myself into it. And I get really charged up about C9 gunners, and I got so much respect for them, that's and I think that's what the leaders should do. You're not there. We had one commanding officer who came to the 3rd Battalion who shall remain nameless, but he told the officers collectively in the officers' mess, my dad was a general, I'm going to be a general, and you're going to make me one. Words to that effect.
Wow.
Yeah, well, that's, there are, and he never got above the colonel rank, thank God. But, it's a different mindset. I'm not surprised. Colonel Kenward, when the Airborne Regiment was disbanded, the most disgraceful act of a government to do, troops are crying leaving the Petawawa when the regiment was closed down. Kenward marched into the Prime Minister's office, and said, what the fuck are you doing? That kind of guy doesn't make general. And the troops don't even know necessarily the commitment he had to them. Like he torpedoed his own career because of what they did to the soldiers. That's a leader. That's a leader. He doesn't change his tune, and I wanted company commanders. And when we went to Afghanistan, I surrounded myself. The only guys I spent any time with were guys who would be critical of me. Okay, guys that I could trust to say, are you sure you want to do that, Colonel? Or that's a stupid fucking idea, Colonel. Or on the other side, guys who I think needed more. And when I say guys, officers who needed more supervision, if you will. The other company commanders, I never saw them. I sent them on missions, and we made sure we had the backup. But I thought, when I was company commander, that's the kind of latitude I wanted, And so I treated them the way I expected to be treated. And one of the company commanders later said to me, sir, I couldn't believe how much risk you were prepared to take. And I said, Risk? I never felt it was risk. I had that much confidence. We'd done simunition training, only unit in the Canadian Forces to that time that had used it. We before we went to in October, before we invaded Afghanistan, we were the immediate reaction force land, and I convinced Colonel Beer that we should rent Miles equipment from the Marine Corps, and we set up a Miles camp for the month of October in Dundurn, Saskatchewan, and I put the company commanders through all sorts of wacko missions, not these cut and dried templates that we do in Wainwright. You advance the contact, you defend, you counterattack, you defend, going back. No, I threw shit at them, and their success or failure was based on the number of casualties. And I trusted them to do their business. And if they failed, it was a learning experience. It wasn't, I didn't say, you should have put a fire base over there, whatever. No, shit happens. How are you going to get through that kind of thing? That's the
Improvise,
difference.
adapt, and overcome. That's how you do it.
Yeah, and I didn't need a laundry list of this is what you should say. There were times where I said something stupid and I had to apologize for it.
Pat, I want to ask you, the first female infantry, did you serve with her in the 3rd?
Yes, in the ranks. Yes, not officer.
No. She was.
We had.
She was a private. Yeah.
Private Shaw and Private Abbey. Now the infantry. There were many females in many other capacities, but we had. I think there were only 2 privates. My mind, it's so long.
To send the first 2 to the 3rd instead of the first to the 2nd. I mean, God, that's brutal.
Oh, they were super soldiers, though.
Is that right? That's fantastic to hear.
Well, that's the thing. And I was criticized later by one of them because she said, "You never came and talked to me." And I said, "Yeah, you were another soldier. Why should I?" But they were really good soldiers.
I've heard that.
Trusted by the other soldiers around them. So, yeah. And that's the way it should be. If a young female wants to go through that shit in the infantry, I don't know why they would, then do what the other guys do. Yep. Don't turn, and like they were super caliber infantry people. And I'm sorry if there was one that I'm forgetting, though. It's just those 2 that stand out in my mind. And I said, there were many.
I thought there was just one, but I would love to get either of them or both of them on the show. Like, what a story that must be.
Yeah. I think one of them holds a grudge against me because I didn't single them out as female infantry, but I can check. I'm in contact with one on the internet, or I see her post on Facebook. I could ask her if she.
I'd love that.
Prepared to talk to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was. I remember once we were doing a Miles exercise where there are real casualties going down, and the RSM and I are going around playing God, walking around, watching these companies attack this. It was in Greaseball Barracks. We set up a fighting in built up areas kind of thing, and they attacking troops had hit a wire entanglement and were under fire. And this young lady gets up, and the RSM, Mr. Price, says, he was a slow talker, and he says, "Sir, you want to come see this?" And she was up there rounding up the guys. Any assault pioneers here? Because her section commander had been a casualty, and she's up there ordering the guys around because
awesome.
She knew, cut from a different kind of cloth. I don't know why, and had the total respect of the troops. As I understand, 2nd Battalion, I talked to some of the officers that served for the female commanding officer. She was apparently a similar kind of personality that not many troops complained about. So that to me is the measure.
I read the book by Sandra Perron, who was the first infantry officer, and she was with the Van Deus, and she got treated like shit. Like, it was so bad. And the whole time, knowing with the experiences that I've had with the Royal 22nd, I wasn't surprised. I was still disappointed, but
yeah,
I kept saying to myself, I don't think that would have happened in the Patricias. And I often wonder, well, am I wrong? Is it just a bias of mine? But from what you're saying, I'm not wrong. that a woman in the infantry is way better off in the patricias, because they get, can you do the job or not? That's all we care.
Oh yeah.
And you get the job done, you get the respect. It's that simple.
The Army of the West used to be renowned for that kind of an attitude, so it doesn't surprise me that we would have female combat arms troops and officers who just fit in, you
Well,
know.
I think some of it is because of the colonel of the regiment, Lady Patricia. I never heard anybody ever say a sideways word about that woman, because it would be worth your fucking life if you did. And like, I am one of the super lucky dudes that has met her a few times, but when I was on tour, there we are in the theater of operations, and she pinned my tour medal on my chest. So what an honor. But the love we had for Lady Patricia, oh my goodness, like just revered. And I think
Yeah,
that
but
had
hey, let
that a
me
big
interrupt.
part to do with it.
I got to interrupt because the love was the other way around too. I remember her
Oh yeah, that's what,
when
and
our
then that's
guys
why.
were yeah when our guys were hit by that fast air and they were evacuated to Landstuhl, and uh, um, I lost her name here. Um,
Countess Mountain of Burma.
no. The current Colonel in Chief,
Oh,
Adrian Clarkson. There's a
right.
picture of her with Private Link, and she's holding his face, you know, like he's got his feet because he had his feet blown off, and she's showing the compassion of a mother, you know, to this young Patricia who'd been wounded, and so I think that's the mutual respect. Like she's got a special relationship or special feelings for the troops that I think is returned to her, and that's the neat thing about the Patricias. I found uh, is that we embraced a Canadian Colonel in Chief. You
And we
know,
have a
like
female name in our name.
no, no,
So
no.
there's something about that where um, we just have more respect for women than I think than some other units.
Yeah, and I'd agree with you, but you know, you've got an audience out there, and I'm very proud of the Van Dews and the RCR also. So to me, it comes down to being proud of the soldiers, eh? And I like the
Hmm.
regimental stuff, but I one of the things I love in my retirement, as much as I hate people, I like seeing. I like seeing some of the troops that I've worked with in the past and catching up on them. Like I don't stalk them, but every now and then they'll post on Facebook, and to see where they've gone and the things that they, you know, I especially cherish having grown up with these guys, and I'm commanding the third battalion was the only career ambition I ever had. So I achieved my life goal, and
That's
it's
awesome.
neat to see these guys going on, like Derek Prohar, who commanded the third battalion. Was I think he was my assistant adjutant way back in the day,
So
but
what years were you CO of the third?
2000 to 2002.
Okay.
But yeah, Derek Prohar, you know, I see Medal of Valor, like being through some real combat. I think he took a sniper round in the chest and lost his hearing from an RPG round, but went back to command the third battalion, and that makes me feel so good to see those young people accomplishing things like that. So
I want to switch gears, Pat.
okay.
I want to talk about the formation of the role of Veterans Ombudsman, of which you were the first. How did that come to be?
Uh, I don't know how it came to be. How I My first recollection of it was I had been sidelined from the Hillier Youth to being a Thai guy at Pearson Peacekeeping Center, um, because I was taking on some of the bullshit that I knew was going to lead to our failure in Afghanistan. But notwithstanding, I was a Thai guy with Pearson Peacekeeping Center, and
What's a Thai guy?
I was seconded to the Pearson Peacekeeping Center, so I was wearing civvies. I was the
Okay.
vice president of the thing. It was all a political thing, and it was a way for me to get closer to my family, because after the third battalion experience, I kind of recognized I wasn't going to command a brigade. I wasn't one of the Hillier youth. And so I was in this office in Ottawa, and I get a call from P.O. Bentley, who had been the chief steward in the 1st Battalion Officers Mess when I was a company commander in my drinking days. And he said he was on an advisory board for the Veterans Ombudsman, and he noticed that my name, that I hadn't submitted an application. And I said, I hadn't heard any of this. So what are you talking about? So he filled me in, and I put it in on the outside chance because I'd given up on being a green collar worker in the military. And I guess they chose somebody else, and they were in a pinch just before the press conference. And I'm saying this because a lot of people, even my family, said, "You got the job? Like, are they crazy?" But I guess they were in a pinch because the press conference had been called, and when the guy that whoever it was that had originally been picked, it was deliberately a very low pay scale in the public service because it was expected to have no authority, and so whoever it was didn't like that because he wanted a life in government, so he punched out, and they called me up and said, "Can you make it to the press conference today?" It was just about that fast. And I think if the minister had a chance to have somebody else second guess him, they would have not accepted me. So it was that fast that I got the call to turn up, and yeah, the rest is history. I
So
created the office.
as ombudsman, when you were in that role, did you actually have any influence? Were you able to get anything done?
No, no. That's why I kind of what I found out was they were setting up a complaints office. This is what I learned over time. Everybody thought it was an office of the Veterans Ombudsman, but it was clear they were going to Blue Cross. And I think they wanted to eliminate Veteran Affairs and just have the Ombudsman to adjudicate on behalf of the government with Blue Cross. But at that time, I had agreed, like, I didn't want to do press and all that shit, and I made kind of a behind the scenes agreement with the minister and his greasy chief of staff and the deputy minister that I wasn't going to grandstand. You know, I would sooner deal with the soldiers, get to know the soldiers, this all service people and veterans, and then let's fix things below the radar kind of thing. And then I found out they were stalling. And like the new Veterans Charter had just been brought in, and it had been brought in under a series of corrupt moves, but we won't go there. But it was brought in so fast that the government said that it hadn't gone through committees and various study groups, but we'll review it every year to make sure it was on track. Well, by the time I got there, it had been on the books for 4 or 5 years, and they'd never reviewed it. And they were giving young casualties these payoffs and sending them on their way. And I tried to get them to do a parliamentary review and working with them, and I was brushed off and ignored until I went ballistic. And well, we weren't on good terms. Sorry, it's been so long. I haven't thought
It's
about
okay,
this.
brother.
We weren't on that. So that played out that way. But I got on the wrong side of the minister very early because it was just when
Who
I
was the
came in.
minister at the time?
Thompson,
Hmm.
stupid as a door. He's recently deceased, so my condolences to the family. But yeah, a used car salesman. Anyways, won't get into the the long and the short of it. But just as I took office, the Americans and Australians had admitted that homelessness was a huge problem in the veteran community. And so I was asked by Nancy Wilson on CBC. I hadn't even put my release hadn't even been affected yet. It just announced my name. And she said, "Well, what do you think of homeless veterans in Canada?" I said, "Well, I don't know, but I'm going to find out real fast." And just left it at that. Well, the first thing that happened to me is I was invited by the Calgary Drop-In Center to come out and meet veterans in homeless veterans. And lo and behold, I go there and there's about 30
Holy
from
shit.
from as far back as the Korean War, but through Cyprus and 30 guys living on the streets that had served Canadian forces for a variety of reasons. And I went outside, and the press was there waiting for me, and they say, "Well, what?" And I said, "Well, it looks like we got a lot of homeless veterans in Canada. Not meaning to pick a fight or whatever." He called me a liar. Thompson, on a Friday afternoon, Minister Thompson on CTV called Stogran a liar. And so I was in my office in downtown Ottawa, or wherever it was, and I walked from my office up to the Salvation Army drop-in center right beside Parliament Hill. And I met the Ottawa Citizen photographer there. And I walked into the dining hall, and I say, "Any veterans here?" Hands go up. And I went outside and got my picture taken of a veteran from the Italian campaign who'd been
Holy shit.
homeless ever since, living on the streets of Ottawa. And that picture made it into the Ottawa Citizen. But that's the kind of deceitfulness that it sickened me. I didn't even like going in his office. And I can tell you some stories where.
Well, we come from a place of accountability or death. Like that, like that's the job. It's improvise, adapt, overcome, but it's accountable or die. It's accountable or the guy next to you dies. So like accountability and being able to trust the guy next to you, that's our life. So going into any other environment where they don't even understand that kind of thing, that's tough. And that's, I think, a great example, Pat, of why transition to civilian life is fucking brutal for us, because especially infantry, more than anybody else, infantry and special forces, where accountability is life. And then we go where people aren't honest, they're not authentic, they're not real, you can't trust them. That's a tough transition.
Can I interrupt you there again? And I don't
Sure.
want to. That you just described human nature. Veterans are no different. You know, um, we end up playing the same games, but because we're veterans, we do it our own way. And I'm only saying that because, like, I'm as in your face and ignorant, and I'm sure some of my posts or replies to some of the things you posted on Facebook, I'm a little snotty at the time and all that, you know. So we're all like that fundamentally, but we got to go back to our conversation we had. Don't let it fuss you. Don't get angry. Uh, we got to understand we're all. There are times where I know you on Facebook, and you might come back a little snappily, and it's so what? It's a discussion. It's water off a duck's back. What we want in the end, and I only found this out when I started worrying about the future for my grandchildren, is we want this country to be strong.
Yeah.
We want to look after our homeless people. We want to have health care. Why don't we have it? I wasn't going to fail in Afghanistan, and nobody can tell me that we failed. We punched way above our weight,
Way above.
but I can't say that about any government in my adult life where I go, oh, yeah, oh, yeah, Stephen Harper maybe have done this, but I can tell you a whole bunch of things he didn't do so that his successor could carry on the graft and corruption, because they don't want to close off those backdoor deals and things like that, but it's human nature. So as much as I condemn the culture up there, and I'll get angry with the individuals, I'm not going to fight them. Like, there are wars being fought right now, and you and I could have been in those things. And I want to trust that the people who are putting our people in these, I call them victims or hostages in Latvia today. Do you see the tons of ammunition that the Ukrainians and Russians are expending shooting at each other? Do you think that battle group in Latvia is not going to get butchered if they go across the border? Like,
Yeah.
What do you think?
They'll be wiped out. There's no way around it.
Why are we playing these games then?
We don't have the numbers. We don't have the equipment.
And we don't have the industrial capacity to produce the kind of ammunition that they're using over there. We don't have so many things, but we focus on the dress standards and all that. I just, again, why don't you and I, instead of talking conservative and liberals, hold our government accountable and say, tighten up some of these things? We want to have, at the end of the day, at the end of 4 years, somebody stand up and give an honest appraisal, a no bullshit appraisal at risk of being imprisoned, of how the government did for the last 4 years. And the Auditor General and Parliament budget officer, why don't these guys have the power of Christ to compel government to behave?
One of the ideas that I would love to see implemented is project management software for the government. So in project management in commercial construction, there's all these different phases of construction. And for each individual phase, the client can go in and say, okay, here's the projected timeline. Here's the percentage that we're done of this particular phase. And it's a simple, you don't need new software. Just use a project management software that already exists and do this with every government project, so that the public has access to it. They can go on, they can see the dashboard, and everybody can see it. Poof, accountability, just like that, which is why it'll never happen. But I'll continue to dream.
As much as I know it all and been there, done that, and all that, I know that I don't know enough about the problems to offer any solutions that aren't just pulled off the top of my head. But I know that we pay generals and senior bureaucrats and politicians an awful lot of money to do that on our behalf. And if you would have failed as a company sergeant major at, whatever, I would have held you accountable. And I would have sent you to RSS, tuck the yuck tuck or something like that. Why don't we do that with our politicians? Why, but we'll play the game and we'll elect them 3 or 4 times. But it comes down to, well, it's better than conservatives or it's better than liberals, or no, we're failing our grandkids. And that's what I put now, everything in perspective. I'm trying to be a role model, although my grandkids won't see this particular podcast. I try to be a role model for my kids and my grandkids. And I worry that we're not handing off the country that somebody handed off to me when I was a young person, where the world was my oyster. And we can blame it on the world. Well, that's the way the world's going. No, fuck off. You know what? We have enough energy in this country to be independent now. If somebody had the vision, and what was their vision when they set this country up? Like, to me, this country makes no sense. When General Hillier stands up and says Canada's a strong and proud company, bullshit. You got at least 2 provinces, 3, that want to leave or are fighting over leaving. We've got some serious problems, not to mention the subcultures that have been established in this country, the crime cultures. Like, we are a criminal haven. I follow the criminal podcasts also. We're a criminal haven here for organized crime. We're the headquarters for Hells Angels International out of Montreal.
That I didn't know.
Yeah, check it out.
Are they out of Quebec? Where are they HQ'd?
Montreal. What's his name? I forget his name. He's fucking famous. He's a legend. They had a Hells Angel International meeting in Dublin late last year, and it was being led by the Montreal chapter of Hells Angels. Our ports are controlled by organized crime, but nobody tells the Canadian public that. We're looking at, we assess military competence by what kind of vehicles we can park on a parade square, but we don't have the industrial capacity to provide the ammunition that they need to fight. And that's another statement of where our economy has gone from the Second World War.
When we talked earlier about homeless veterans, the thing that popped into my head is Tommy Prince. So for those that don't know, Tommy Prince was a member of the 1st Special Service Force. So the Devil's Brigade was actually named after Tommy Prince, because it was Tommy that the Germans called the devil. And that's how that grew. So the famous Devil's Brigade, that was basically all around Tommy Prince. And then later he served as a patrician in Korea. But Tommy Prince, underdecorated, even though he's like the most highly decorated guy ever, he was still underdecorated because he was First Nations guy. Uh, should we do a movie about Tommy Prince, like a proper Hollywood
Mm,
level movie about Tommy Prince and the First Special Service Force, and go through his life right to his death, homeless on the streets? That one movie, like, because it hasn't changed. It really hasn't changed.
I
This is,
found that out as ombudsman.
pardon?
That's one of the things I discovered was how atrociously our history was with Aboriginal veterans, but
Oh,
even the treatment today in many cases. Yeah, yeah. I didn't know that. I knew he was a member of this first Special Service Force. In fact, in the 3rd Battalion, I tried to emulate the first Special Service Force. Like I named our exercises after conquests of the first Special Service Force. In fact, our final exercise in Dundurn with the Marine Corps Miles equipment was exercise Venturesome Brave. Braves being the first Special Service Force, but
which
coming back.
in the States turned into the Green Berets.
Mm,
And
but
that's
the
the reason
story of
the reason why they wear green berets is from us, because
what was
we
that
wore
right?
green berets. That's why the green berets are green berets. It's from the Canadians. It's a Canadian hand down. They wear them all fucked up, but
I don't want to leave your message about homelessness and the way Tommy Prince passed away. The life that he lived. And I shudder to think that there are young troops that I served with who are, in fact, I know there are on the streets. So,
yeah, there
and,
are,
and
and
some
that's
of them
why.
want to be there. So some of them are quite happy with their existence, but we could still be helping them nonetheless. But yeah,
Well, one of
sorry.
my major sponsor, the Canadian Legacy Project, they're the Homes for Heroes people. So they have tiny homes for veterans. What a fantastic organization!
Yeah,
And I'm on the board of directors for the Veterans Association, which also has veterans homelessness programs, and they get guys off the street, that would be dead or frostbitten otherwise.
yeah, yeah. No, there's some great work being done within the community. And I think, in the grand scheme of things, it would be chump change for Veteran Affairs to really clean up their act. And there's another chief of defense staff that went into the job. And I can say my wife fights with Veteran Affairs on my behalf. I've just washed my hands of it.
Yeah.
It wasn't cleaned up. It's still the nightmare that when I was Veterans Ombudsman that it's always been. And I don't blame the employees in Veteran Affairs. Um, many of my early employees in the Veterans Ombudsman office came from Veteran Affairs because they were so fed up with how they had to treat veterans. So they knew where the skeletons were, and the rank and file in the department were very helpful in helping us expedite issues and things like that. I think it's very fixable, but it just, yeah, the stuff that's going on, the talk about benefit of the doubt, like this should be. Anyways, am I
Overall,
showing how
Pat, I
tired I
think
am?
that if we told our stories better, and that's part of what I do on the show, I suppose, but if we told our stories better and we lifted up people like Tommy Prince, or what was the First Nation sniper name? I was trying to come up with his name, like Patagomo or something.
Yeah. I know the name. I wouldn't dare try to pronounce it, but yes,
Yeah, I
a
just
legend.
butchered it. I know I butchered it, but there's so many, and I think the best place to start is with our First Nations veterans, especially in the world of DEI. So why not? Fine. Let's focus on our First Nations veterans, and remember that we are kick-ass warriors, and there's nothing wrong with that image. But it seems to me that every Canadian government doesn't want to see us as kick-ass, door-kicking, blow them up warriors like they do in the States. They want to see us as care bears doing the care bear stare, and that's how they try to paint peacekeepers. It's like, yeah, that's not what it was like over there. It was a fucking war. Thanks.
Yeah.
Um, it was a war wearing blue helmets, but no, they want to have this care bear sort of image of our military, and that's not what the military does. We're not there to hand out hugs.
Yeah. and I don't know that it's because when you talk to these politicians and stuff, um, they want to do good, eh? But something in government is there's a different focus somewhere at government, and I think it's the the prime minister's cronies, because I met so many people from the liberals and conservatives who had apologized for the abysmal treatment of veterans, and I think they're sincere when they say that. But there are some people that have other interests in mind, and that's just not high enough on their priority. The people around the prime minister. That's the problem with Canada right now. There are no checks and balances for our prime minister, and so yeah, I really call it our deep state, whatever it is. Somebody's benefiting by disadvantaging veterans.
Probably.
Yeah,
In our system too, Canadians don't know that our prime ministers have way too much power. Like
yeah, that's my
way,
point.
way too much. Like a Canadian prime minister has more unilateral power over Canada than a U.S. president does over the states by a lot.
Well, our head of state, who is there to change the government if they lose confidence in it, is appointed by the very government that she is expected to kick out of parliament because of a loss of confidence. Like, it's a ridiculous circle, but you'll get uh, political scientists, because I've been down this road, political scientists say, well, it's, conventions in Canada are the core of our, all this gibberish and bullshit. No, it doesn't work. We got to find a way. We should have a head of state that is separate from head of government, that the commander in chief of the Canadian forces should be a commander in chief of the Canadian forces, and the CDS should get a PER written by the governor general, not by the PMO. And there has to be that split. You're under operational command of the governor general, but operational control of the government of the day. And if the government of the day is sending JTF2 snipers over to kill kids in Gaza, then somebody should be there to make sure that's in accordance with Canadian values. We have no checks and balances. The prime minister does what he wants. Remember the We Charity? That
Yep.
scandal. And what did they do? They uprooted and moved out of Canada so that there's no way we can follow up on them. The SNC scandal, obstruction of justice with Raybould Wilson. Yeah, we've really got to change that system before we think that our politics is legitimate.
No, agreed, brother. Well, we're about there, man. And hour 20, not so bad.
Well, I got to apologize. I haven't ranted like this in a long time.
No, there's nothing to apologize for, Pat. I am nothing but grateful for you coming on and talk to me. I've been wanted to talk to you for fucking ever. And so this is great. And I hope that we do it again.
Yeah, well, I love this format. I learned so much from podcasts, and I hope other people start learning first person singular from guys like you. So, bless you in your work.
Thanks, brother. I'm trying. I'm trying.
Right on. We'll keep in touch.
All right. Stay in the line, Pat. You're listening to Operation Tango Romeo, the Trauma Recovery Podcast for veterans, first responders, and their families. If you got any value whatsoever out of this conversation today, please help a brother out. Share like the sugar bear, because sharing is caring.